Good afternoon and welcome to today's CGS webinar using consultations to support strategic decision making. I'm Catherine Hazelrig, the Assistant Director of Communications at the Council of Graduate Schools, and presenting today will be Robert Augustine, Senior Vice President at the Council of Graduate Schools, and Lisa Armistead, Associate Provost for Graduate Programs at Georgia State University. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thank you, Catherine. This is Bob Augustine here at the Council of Graduate Schools, and I'm delighted to be presenting this webinar on CGS Strategic Consultations with my friend and colleague Lisa Armistead from Georgia State University. We'll go on to the next slide, and this slide will give you an overview of what we're about to speak about. And so we're ready for the next slide. We'll be talking about the goal-setting phase of a consultation, an important first step in moving forward with the consultation, and then I'll talk a little bit about what happens once you've said you're ready to move forward with a consultation. I'll talk about the CGS models for a consultation and their costs, and then I'll finish off with some of the usual areas people look at for a consultation, and also the forum coming up at the annual meeting. So in the next slide, this is a consultation has an initiation phase. This phase is all about establishing the goals for a consultation and is one of the most important first steps. This begins with a conference call between myself and the representatives at the university, sometimes just the dean, or the dean may have an entire team, or it may be other representatives from the university. During this conference call, we spend some time talking about what would be the areas you want consultants to focus on in order to establish ways to improve in those areas. During this discussion, I also review the different models that we have available, what their costs are, and what the typical processes are. At the conclusion of the call, I'm going to take some time to write this up very carefully and then send it to you and your team. Your team will then take it and make any necessary corrections or changes, and then I will send this back to you, and this now establishes the goals for the consultation. I'll also include a template for a site visit, so you can see and have a sense of how a site visit would work. At this point, I wait to hear from you, and if I don't hear from you, I'll do a couple of follow-ups in the next 3 months and then put your request on hold until I hear from you. And that's the starting point. Next slide. The next slide begins the consultation phase. Once I have confirmation from you that you're ready to move forward, I know what model you want, and you've given me some potential dates at your university, I begin the process of finding consultants that can help you. I look for consultants who have expertise based on the goal areas you've identified. I look for a consultant who might come from an institution of similar scope and mission, and then one that might come from an institution that might be aspirational to your institution. Once I have a list of potential consultants, I send invitations to them. Once they confirm that they're available during the selected dates, I send the institution and the consultants a confirmation letter. That establishes now the specific dates for the consultation, and the consultants are in place. They complete the necessary forms, and the process where I'm deeply involved begins to conclude, and it shifts to a process between the consultants and the institution. Next slide. Once the consultants are confirmed and the dates confirmed, the consultants establish a conference call with the institutional leaders. During that conference call, the goals are all reviewed so the consultants are clear on the areas, and the institution and the consultants identify materials the consultants will review in advance of the consultation so they're fully prepared when they arrive on campus. This is the place where the agenda gets established and the names of the people who will be on campus that day that the consultants will meet with are established. Typically, a consultation agenda includes meetings with the president and provost of your institution, the collegiate deans, representatives of the graduate council, representatives of the graduate student body, the staff in the graduate college, and then any number of other representatives based on what the goal focus might be. Once that's all established, typically I send copies of recently completed reports to the consultants, so they'll have a good model on how to write the report. Sometimes the consultants, the institution, want to have a conference call with me, and so sometimes we follow that as a step. in some consultations. Once all those discussions are had and the site visit is established, the consultants arrive on your campus the evening before the consultation. This is an important rendezvous period because this is the time where you and the consultants go back through that agenda to make sure that there are no surprises. Everyone's clear on who's meeting with whom during the next couple of days, and if there are any changes necessary, it takes place then. Over the first full day, consultants usually start as early as 8 in the morning, and they're there all day until 5 o'clock in the evening. They might have an unscheduled lunch or an unscheduled dinner. During that time, they begin drafting out their report. If it's a 2-day consultation, they spend, or 3-day, they spend a full day the next day, and on the day that the consultation concludes, they're usually on campus until about 2 in the afternoon, and then they move on their way. After the site visit is concluded, they have approximately 60 days to send me a draft report. And at that point in time, again, the things shift back to me. So the consultants now have done their work. They've established the agenda, they've gone to the campus, they've written up a draft report, and now I have the report, and so we can go on to the next slide. In the next slide, I take some time to review the report, and if there are any areas I don't understand, I get involved with the consultants to make sure it's clear. I'll send the institution a draft report, gives them a chance to make any corrections or changes to the report before it's distributed more broadly. Once we have the final report and final letter sent, then that report can be shared with the entire campus. That's when costs and reimbursements occur at that time, and at the conclusion, a consultancy ends with a letter from President Ortega to the consultants thanking them, to the consultants provost thanking them for their service in this way. Next slide. So CGS has used 2 models for consultancies for an extended period of time. A 2-consultant 2-day model, and you can see the costs on the slide. That model essentially costs $9,000 plus whatever the travel costs to the consultants might be. For a more extensive consultation, we provide a 3-consultant 3-day model. The costs there are $15,250 plus the travel expenses, and you can see what the costs boil down to there. Next slide. Currently, we're piloting a mini-consultant model. A mini-consultant model is a 1-consultant, 1 or 1.5 day model, and the costs range from about $5,250 on up. We're using this because several of our institutions are finding it useful to have a consultation model that is more focused on a fewer number of goals that are of immediate attention. We're also piloting our first international consultation model with one of our international affiliates in Chile. We've just gotten approval to move forward, and we're looking forward to piloting that particular consultation. Next slide, please. This slide lists the 8 most frequently requested areas for a consultation. Under each one of these areas on a summary letter, I would have identified the specific areas that you want the consultants to look at. So there'd be a much more detailed review in each of these areas. And while these are the top 8 areas, more than 30 different areas have been identified over the past 2 years of areas for a consultation. So they widely vary by institutional mission and need and focus. Organization administration, enrollment management, budgeting, admissions, these are frequent areas of focus for a consultation for a variety of different reasons. And the next slide, these are institutions that have recently completed a CGS strategic consultation. These are deans there that you could talk to and discuss if you have interests. And I will be hosting a forum at the annual meeting from 5 to 6 p.m. on December the 8th in the Cushing B room. You are welcome to join us. In that meeting, which is very informal, we will have institutional representatives from institutions that have had consultations, as well as members who have served as consultants. And so you can bring questions there, talk with deans who've used consultations to advance their institutions. And now, the really important part of this is with Dean Armistead, who's going to tell you how she used a consultation to advance her institution. So I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Bob, and good afternoon. I'm very pleased to share my experience with the CGS consultation. From start to finish, the process was outstanding, and as I think you'll hear as I worked through my presentation, I was very pleased with the outcome, as were my colleagues here at GSU. I'm going to begin with a bit of information about the GSU context. Then I'm going to move to discuss the goals of our consultation, the implementation process, and I'll conclude with the outcomes of the consultation. Can you go to the next slide, please? GSU is a Research One university. We're located in downtown Atlanta. We have over 52,000 students due to a recent consolidation with a local community college. Of our 52,000 plus students, just over 7,000 are graduate students. We're a very diverse institution with no majority racial or ethnic group. The vast majority of our undergraduates receive Pell Grants, and last year we generated over $147 million in external funding for scholarship and research. Our graduate programs sit at the intersection of what I view as outstanding scholarly opportunities for graduate students, accompanied by the benefit of working with a broad range of students at the undergraduate level. However, next slide, please. We are also a very decentralized university in terms of graduate programs. We have 9 colleges or schools. The 2 in green that you see before you were added since the CGS consultation visit. Prior to the CGS consultation, all 9 colleges, or the 7 that were in place, managed their own admission processes, independently undertook efforts around progression and retention. Some offered professional development opportunities, workshops, various support, though many of the colleges did not. And there was no centralized presence around graduate programs, no graduate school, etc. Can we go to the next slide, please? This decentralization resulted in limited resources for graduate students. In particular, the GSU leadership, which was new to the university in 2008 and 9, was increasing centralization in almost all areas except for graduate education. And I'll give you a specific example. Our provost, to whom I report, holds a meeting every morning at 8:30, which really means 8:20 because she's from Minnesota and apparently everything starts early in Minnesota. And this meeting includes almost all of the vice presidents of the university and all of the associate provosts. And prior to 2014, there was no representation for graduate programs at that regular morning meeting. And mind you, these morning meetings involve resource distribution, idea generation, plans for innovation and bringing pilots to scale. And to be frank, prior to 2014, graduate programs really got short shrift at GSU because, again, there was nobody at that morning meeting table. There was no oversight centrally or engagement centrally around graduate programming, and not surprisingly, our enrollments were declining and morale around graduate programs was pretty low. Next slide. So it was in July of 2014, at the recommendation of an ad hoc Senate committee, that I was brought in as the Associate Provost for Graduate Programs in the first central position at GSU with this role. And that allowed me to have a seat at that morning meeting table and get graduate programming more on the mind of our central administrators. Initially, I focused on cleaning up policies and practices, then moved to taking care of the students that were currently enrolled, figuring if these students are unhappy or not progressing, then it would be hard to draw in new ones. But about a year into the role, I was tasked by the president and provost to turn around our declining enrollments, and in particular to turn around those declines through centralizing admissions and marketing and recruitment. This decision to centralize admissions, marketing, and recruitment was well received by some colleges or deans in those colleges, but not so well received by others. As you might imagine or may experience on your own campuses, the effort to centralize anything, even professional development opportunities or additional resources for students, isn't always met favorably across the board. So I'm a professor in psychology. I had some administrative experience, but frankly limited experience in terms of admissions processes outside of clinical psychology, and so I was embarking on what I saw as a significant and somewhat scary effort with limited guidance or experience. And so we called in the cavalry and reached out to CGS, and through a collaboration between my office and the College of Arts and Sciences began the consultation process. Next slide. As Bob mentioned, the goal-setting process is sort of the first step in undertaking the consultation, and it may be the most important step in the process. You really have to clearly identify what you need help with in order to make the most of the consultation, and the goals that you see in front of you were finalized after a couple of phone conversations between myself, my colleagues in Arts and Sciences, and Bob, as well as emails back and forth. It was an efficient process, but it was also a very intentional and engaged process because we wanted to make sure that we were starting out on the right foot. The goals that you see up here on the slide, the first and fourth of these goals were specific to my office, and goals 2 and 3 were specific to the College of Arts and Sciences. But our hope was that what we learned around professional development programs and tracking progression and completion in arts and sciences could be generalized to the broader graduate community, and you'll hear more about that in a bit. So we felt like we got off to a great start with Bob's help in terms of generating clear and addressable goals. Next slide, please. Once our goals were clear, I went out to sell the consultation to relevant folks on campus. I wanted to maximize campus engagement. I had high hopes for the outcome of this process, and I knew that if we didn't have relatively full engagement from the campus community, it would be hard to sell the outcome or the goals that we were hoping to accomplish once the consultation was over. Selling this process was a little political. As I'd already mentioned, not all folks were enthusiastic about centralization of admissions. There were also some folks unhappy about the fact that I was collaborating with Arts and Sciences in this process. It's the largest college on campus, and it's sometimes seen as sort of dominating the GSU agenda. But nonetheless, after some fast talking on my part and with great support from many of my colleagues, we ended up with representation and engagement in the consultation process from all colleges during and after the visit. Once Bob let us know who our consultants would be, we sent a barrage of information, probably more than they were looking to get. We sent them links to relevant web pages, and probably most importantly, we shared our strategic plan with the consultants. At GSU, we have a strategic plan that has only 5 goals, several initiatives within each goal, but there are 5 goals, the second of which is applicable to graduate programs and our effort to strengthen and grow graduate programs at GSU. And we live and breathe this strategic plan. Nothing happens on campus, certainly no resources are distributed that aren't directly tied to that strategic plan. So we felt like it was important for the consultants to have a good grasp on what drives the university. In addition to sending information, and after they had a bit of time to digest some of that information, we had conference calls with the visitors, with the consultants, and we hosted them, as Bob mentioned, for dinner the evening before. And these pre-visit activities were also very critical. They provided an opportunity for us to talk some about the history of Georgia State, why there wasn't a graduate school, and just to be very frank and honest with them about where they might encounter some landmines or what we could inform them about that might minimize the likelihood of them encountering those landmines. I'm going to have to pause 1 minute because my computer went to sleep and I need to pull these slides back up. My apologies, just 1 sec. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. We had a packed agenda during the visit, and I'll talk to you a bit more about that in just a minute. But we also thought ahead, and by we I mean my colleagues in the College of Arts and Sciences primarily, as well as my provost. We thought ahead about meeting management. Would one of us, me, the associate dean, the assistant dean, or I be in each meeting, or would there be meetings with the consultants that didn't include us? We did decide not to attend, strategically not to attend a couple of the meetings, but we were in most of the meetings. We talked some about how active we might need to be in those meetings, when we might need to jump in or sit back, even thinking about, were we going to be in the front of the room or kind of in the back of the room? And we may have overthought this, because it turned out that we had to do little more than introduce the consultants and the topic at the outset of all of these meetings. The consultants were well prepared with questions, all very relevant, all very on point. They clearly understood the GSU context, and they really demonstrated an impressive ability to engage the full audience, all of the folks attending each of the meetings. And some of the meetings, had 20, 25 folks in them, although the majority were smaller than that. Their ability to navigate what could have been and was occasionally kind of tricky terrain resulted in very productive dialogues in all of the meetings. The post-consultation activities were also very collaborative and very efficient. As Bob mentioned, the consultants drafted a report that he previewed before we did, but I was particularly pleased to have the opportunity to review the report in advance of it being finalized. As you might expect, there were a couple of small details that needed to be corrected, and there were also a couple of points that we asked consultants to elaborate a bit on. One piece that we asked to have pulled because we thought it might trigger some kind of a defensive response to the report, and that process, I think, resulted in an outstanding product that we were proud, frankly, to disseminate widely on campus, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in just a minute. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in terms of the specific agenda, early in the visit, the consultants met with my provost and me, and I was sort of, frankly, holding my breath at the beginning of that meeting, because she's not an easy woman to impress, but she was immediately impressed by the group that we had on campus. Right from the start, our consultants demonstrated what they brought to the table, what they had to contribute. The dialogue with my provost was direct, clear, and very informative, I think, both for her and for the consultants in terms of understanding her commitment to graduate education. As part of the visit, particular to my goals around centralizing admissions, we also included visits with relevant undergraduate admissions folks and folks from other centralized offices, because these folks were going to be more involved in graduate admissions. Our new graduate admissions space is in the same physical space as undergraduate admissions, so I wanted to have the Director of Undergraduate Admissions involved in the consultation process. And within the College of Arts and Sciences, the consultants met with department chairs, graduate directors, relevant administrators, and with students. And the meeting with students was one in particular that we did not join the consultants for. We wanted students to be able to talk frankly to the consultants. And then day 3 focused on they're kind of bringing together all of the goals of the consultation through a meeting with our institutional research folks. They had lunch on their own, during which they just sort of magically pulled together all the pieces of what they had taken in over the time of their visit. And then the day ended with an exceptionally helpful wrap-up meeting where they walked through essentially what they presented in writing as part of the report. So there were really no surprises in the report that was sent to us, because we'd had the opportunity to talk with them about the report and about, what was important in terms of our priorities, what could be less important or minimized. And I think that wrap up at the end made a big difference in the final process. Next slide. So hopefully I've given you a decent sense of the process, and let me talk next about the outcome, which of course is probably the most important part of all of this. My aim was to leverage the consultation in as many ways as possible. So although you've heard me say this was really about better managing the centralization of admissions, right from the start it was clear that what the consultants brought to the table was absolutely input into that process and how we could do it well. Lots of best practices offered, but really much more than that. And so I began with my provost. After we finalized the report that same evening, I shipped it off. I pushed the button on my computer and delivered it to my provost, who read the full report. I met with her the next day, and she had tabbed parts of the reports, underlined parts of it, and we talked through many aspects of it. She was very, very impressed with the final product and enthusiastic with where we might take it. I should say that she's a former dean of a graduate school and was very engaged with the Council of Graduate Schools before she became a provost, and so she really valued what CGS could offer to Georgia State. But she was a motivated reader, and one of the things I wanted to ensure is that the report could be distributed to folks who might be less than enthusiastic about reading the 15 or 20 pages, but would be willing to read an executive summary. So in collaboration with my arts and sciences colleagues, I drafted an executive summary that preceded the full report, and then began distributing it to various groups on campus. My second audience, the second group of folks or audience of the report, was my morning meeting colleagues. And so I sent the report with the executive summary out to that group of about 7 or 8 folks, and then we devoted the entirety of one morning meeting to sort of how to leverage the report, how to make the most of it. And I got a lot of guidance from my colleagues on how to roll it out and maximize the outcomes. And that guidance resulted in the spreadsheet, or the portion of a spreadsheet that you see here, where we laid out what the recommendation was. Another column included why this recommendation. Another column included the status of the recommendation, because there were some things on which I'd already started between the time the consultants were here and we were rolling out the report. My third audience after the provost and my morning meeting colleagues was the Dean's Council, and this was the meeting that I was most anxious is probably an overstatement, but I was most curious about what the outcome would be, because again, while several deans were very enthusiastic to be engaged in the process, a couple others were less so. But that group received the report and incredibly well, and dialogued with me and the provost very productively as a result of that report. So you'll see that recommendation in the spreadsheet to establish a graduate life center. The Dean of the Libraries was in this Dean's Council meeting with our colleagues and mentioned that he was undertaking a master plan to completely renovate and update our library, and he felt like that might be a good opportunity to incorporate a graduate life center. And so suddenly I'm sitting on the library master planning committee, and along with a graduate student representative and several of the library colleagues engaging with an architecture firm, and we have now well, we don't have it now, but we have a plan to have, and hopefully we'll soon have, an entire floor of the library devoted to a graduate student life center. I also took the report to relevant Senate committees. So in particular, our Planning and Development Committee reviewed the report and sat down with me to talk about the outcomes that I recommended as part of that spreadsheet. So they had the executive summary, the report, and the spreadsheet that you see. Of course, I took the report back to the relevant graduate administrators, so the associate deans for graduate studies in all the colleges, as well as the staff through the Graduate Issues Working Group. And I'll highlight a few other outcomes. So you'll see the need to establish a resource flow as one of the recommendations from the report. And as of about 4 or 5 months ago, I got a reliable and stable budget. Prior to that, my budget was just part of the general provost budget. So I now know exactly how much money I have to spend each year on which types of activities, and have been able to negotiate around adding to that budget as needed. You'll see a recommendation to scale the provost dissertation fellowships. So when the consultants were here, I had secured some money to support students who were within their last 12 months of completing their dissertation projects. I worked with the provost to set up a $2,000 a month stipend for these students for up to 12 months. They were meeting with me monthly around monthly goals that they had set. Their chairs were having to let me know whether they had met their monthly goals. And I had a total of 5 provost dissertation fellows prior to the consultant's visit, and based upon their recommendation and the success of the program, we now have over 55 and are looking at 22 new applications this week. So the report certainly helped graduate students very directly in that respect. Another recommendation was to expand external funding for students. So we did not, when I came into this position, have many students with National Research Service grants, F-31s. We had no students with the NSF GRFP fellowships, and few with other kinds of fellowships. And so I got a half-time position in my office, a fellowship advisor who devotes her time to identifying resources, external fellowship opportunities for graduate students, and then structures and mentors them through the process of securing those fellowships. And we set a record this year with 11 new fellowships on campus. For arts and sciences, this consultation occurred during our process for searching for a new dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. And Amber Amari and Marianne Romsky, who were my colleagues in Arts and Sciences working with me on this consultation, were able to take this report, the consultant's report, to the newly hired dean, who then, through the process of creating a strategic plan for the College of Arts and Sciences, incorporated many of the recommendations from the consultants. As I was reading through the draft of the strategic plan for Arts and Sciences, I was able to see several recommendations, particularly around tracking, progression, and retention activities, as well as some of the professional development pieces folded into the College of Arts and Sciences' new strategic plan. So I hope you've gotten a taste of how valuable this process as well as the outcome was for me, as well as my arts and sciences colleagues. I could go on, but I'll stop now so that we have plenty of time for questions.
Okay, so on your screen you see the GoToMeeting dashboard where you can submit any questions that you would like to ask Bob or Lisa. And we'll start with the first question for Bob. So Bob, if someone is interested in doing a consultation, what's the first thing they should do?
Call and arrange a conference with me between myself and you and or your team of people. My direct line is 202-461-3854, and we'll set up that conference call, and that's how it starts.
Okay, great. Bob, what are some key factors in making sure the consultation is successful?
I think the key first step is for you and your team to think about what it is you see as needing to change in your graduate enterprise and begin to articulate what those areas of focus would be. So are you feeling like your organizational structure isn't working well for you? What is it about that structure you have concerns about? So when we sit down to write the goals, we can specify what that would be. Once we've written each one of the goals for your consultation, I think the next most important part of it that Lisa pointed out is to get your university deeply engaged. So when the consultants come to your campus, you have plenty of voices at the table to talk about what the envisioned future and envisioned improvements would be for your campus, so that the consultants can provide a really well-defined roadmap of ways to move and advance graduate study in your campus. So establishing the goals, getting the campus engaged. Elisa, anything to add?
I think ensuring that your consultants are prepared so that they know what to expect when they get on campus. And so for us, the phone calls that we had with the consultants prior to their visit and the dinner the night before, I think maximized their ability to sort of manage the room so that they weren't blindsided by anything that they heard, weren't thrown off. They were really able to fully engage all of the groups. I think, and I can't be sure of this, but I think that their preparation beforehand really made a difference in what they were able to get directly from the folks who participated in the consultation. And to be frank, I think their ability to manage the room and the preparation that they came into the room with really gave the process credibility. So many of the folks that were in the room with the consultants were the receivers of the report, have been impacted by and are engaged with the outcomes of the report, and I think the professionalism, the preparation that our consultants displayed during their time here increased the value and increased my ability to leverage the report successfully.
Great. Lisa, we have another question specifically for you. Someone wants to know, did the 1 hour time frame suggested in the agenda work for your discussion groups, or did you allow for longer meetings in your schedule?
There were some meetings that lasted longer than an hour, particularly those that involved larger groups, so that there would be more time for conversation. So, there were actually a couple of meetings that were less than an hour. So when they were meeting individually, for example, with the director of undergraduate studies, undergraduate admissions, that required a little less time, which then allowed more time when they were meeting with, for example, with all of the graduate associate deans across campus. So one of the ways I gauged the time needed for each of the meetings on campus was the number of people that were going to be in the room.
Great. Let's see. Next question. Some universities have combined units, graduate studies and research. Can the consultation address issues in both areas or just graduate studies?
I'll take a stab at that. And in fact, it is true that there are a variety of organizational models for graduate education. And yes, we can accommodate institutions that have a combined graduate and research enterprise. Some graduate schools also include the international elements of the institution. We can accommodate that. There are other combinations that are not as frequent as those two, but once we know what your combination or what your organizational model might be, it would give me an opportunity to seek out consultants who have expertise with that model who can assist you.
Okay. Lisa, could you please provide a few examples of grad-specific services at GSU?
So I can talk some about those that come out of my office, and please type in quickly if I'm going off task from the question. But out of my office, we're now managing the graduate application or admissions process, but we also offer a range of professional development workshops, some of which we've actually put in place after my attending CGS meetings and learning about them. For example, we offer now each semester write-ins for graduate students, where those working on a thesis, dissertation, or manuscript for publication are sequestered for a week and fed and focus on writing in particular. The Provost Dissertation Fellowships come out of my office. The support for securing external fellowships for your work also comes out of my office. Just today we ran a workshop on LinkedIn and setting up your LinkedIn profile, offering headshots for students that were moving towards setting up a LinkedIn profile. Last semester we had a boot camp around applying for jobs, building resumes and CVs, and some of these workshops, including the last two I mentioned, are conducted in collaboration with other offices on campus. So our career services, for example, ran the career boot camp and the LinkedIn workshop. We offer grant writing workshops as well, and we put those on in collaboration with some of our subject librarians and our research office, as well as input from myself.
So I have a question from Dr. Buhlman. She wants me to review how I go about the process of selecting consultants, and this is a really important question. So I maintain a list of graduate deans that have expertise in various areas and have completed presentations at our annual meeting and summer workshops in the various areas that you might be interested in having input from. So I have that list of deans, and these are all seasoned deans who have successfully presented for us. Sometimes the institutions are aware of certain deans and specifically ask or recommend certain deans, and I certainly then will approach those deans if they are available, so you can certainly suggest certain deans that you're interested in. I also try to select deans that would have expertise and experience with an institution that might be similar to yours, similar in Carnegie classification, similar in size, having similar kinds of structures in place. And as I mentioned, I also try to look for deans who may have maybe from an institution that might be aspirational to you. So if your aspiration is to add doctoral programs, I might look for an institution that recently has done that. Or if your aspiration is to increase research funding, I might look for an institution that has that kind of recent experience that can bring that to the table for you. So those are the various parameters that I use in trying to select the right consultants for you. And then usually I run these, I make these consultants, I speak with them beforehand so I can get a good sense of their expertise and ability to address the goals and issues of the consultation.
Okay, well, it looks like that's all the questions we have for today. So we thank you all for joining us, and wanted to just remind you that yes, the recording and slides will be emailed to participants and posted on the website, and we have 2 upcoming CGS webinars. The information is also available on the CGS website, and if you go to the main page of the website, the benchmarking and consultations is currently in the hero area, so you will have no trouble finding it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Bob or Lisa. And thank you so much. Have a great day.